So it's actually fantastic to be back here. You know, it's funny, I was only gone for 2 weeks, but it feels to me like a really, really long time. Kind of good, kind of not good, right? It's good to be away. It was good to kind of be off somewhere. As I think you probably know, I think Nancy mentioned this, that Bonnie and I were down in Florida, and we spent part of our time in Disney World. Now, I don't know if anybody watches the news, but a couple weeks ago, Florida was kind of an interesting place to be. Turns out the fourth worst hurricane in Florida history occurred. And that's a state known for hurricanes. And we were actually there for the hurricane itself. And as we were there, what's funny, we were there on purpose. We actually flew down a day early to make sure we didn't miss it. And that's actually the truth. Now, why make such a reckless choice? Because it certainly seems reckless. I mean, was it the intoxicating thought of Mickey Mouse was just so much that I just had to get down there? Or maybe there was something more going on that made that make sense for our family. Now, for Bonnie and I, Disney's kind of a thing. Well, it's kind of like this. For Bonnie, it's a thing, which makes it a thing for me too. You know, sort of thing. I mean, I like Disney well enough, but she really likes Disney. And I think part of that is that she never went. So she went the very first time in 2001. So she was like, you know, give her age away, like 34 years old, 35 years old the first time she ever went, and we went together. And I'd been there a few times before that. And so what's kind of happened for us is that Disney World has kind of become this place where kind of no matter what's going on in our lives, no matter how, you know, 20 years ago when our business was really struggling, it was a place to get away to kind of just reset. And it kind of has remained that for us. So it's something we kind of really escape to. And we really enjoy being there, you know, whether it's the parks, the hotels, the restaurants, all those sort of things. And so what was happening in our trip was that we wanted to maximize our time there. That we kind of had allocated an amount of time to be there. We wanted to kind of get full use of that time. But of course, about a week before it was time to leave, I don't watch much weather. You know, I just look at my phone. Oh, it's 44 degrees. Kind of all I need to know, sort of thing. But I happened to notice there was a hurricane in the Gulf, or actually in the Caribbean at that point. And it's not going to hit Florida. And over the few days, we started watching it, and we realized that we were supposed to arrive on a Tuesday, and the hurricane was expected to hit on Wednesday, which meant that the probability was our flight was going to get canceled. So what do? Well, you could cross your fingers, hope that your flight doesn't get canceled, but ultimately it did. Or we could say that, you know, we'll wait till after the hurricane and then try to get a flight and get down there afterwards. Now, of course, that's going to reduce the amount of time we have there. And if you've tried to book any kind of flights lately, you know last-minute bookings of flights don't work. But it turns out, 2 days before a hurricane, there are tons of flights to Florida. So we jumped in and got down there on Monday. Now, no matter how much we enjoy Disney, showing up there to be in a hurricane doesn't make a lot of sense unless one thing is true. Trust. We had to trust that we were going to be okay. We had to trust that the Disney organization understood and knew how to deal with hurricanes. Because fundamentally, when things get bad, what's important is, are you getting the support you need? Are the services there that you need? Do you find what you need in that time? And we had that trust. Now, why? Why would we have that trust? Because you can always trust big corporations to take care of you? No, that is not the reason why we had that trust. It turns out that although Disney World has existed for almost exactly 50 years, the first 30 years, they very rarely dealt with hurricanes. You know, a couple here and there. But in the past 20 years, they've dealt with a lot of hurricanes. 2004 alone, they dealt with 3 hurricanes. And one of the things that we've monitored over the years is that initially, when the hurricanes would happen, they didn't deal with them as well as I would have liked, in the sense that I would not have been comfortable being there during the storm. But here's the thing. they learned. Over the past 20 years, dealing with more and more hurricanes, they have refined their processes, and they have changed the way they deal with things, and they've actually gotten better and better at dealing with hurricanes. No matter what you think of them as an organization, when it comes down to providing services in a hurricane, I truly believe there is no one better equipped than them. And part of that we learned when we lived in Florida. That this is not a well-known thing, but if you live in Central Florida and a hurricane is coming and you don't feel safe at home, do you know what many people do? They go book a room at Disney. And they actually leave their homes and go to a Disney hotel to ride out hurricanes because Disney's gotten that good at it. And we took a direct hit on that hurricane while we were there. If you follow me on Instagram, you'd see the videos of, off my balcony with the rain and the wind blowing and the storms. And winds were upwards of 90 miles an hour. Now, we weren't hit like the western coast. On the southwestern coast, that's a different story, right? They got pummeled. But we got over 10 inches of rain in less than 48 hours. Yet, I didn't even see a puddle. I'm not even kidding. We never lost electricity. We never lost water. Restaurants were open with discounted prices, which never happens at Disney, by the way. Everything was open. I got pictures of Bonnie in the middle of a hurricane with Mickey Mouse and Goofy. It wasn't me, by the way. Right? Mickey Mouse and the other Goofy while we were there. Now, this is not a plug for Disney World. This is to make a point. Why did all that happen? Why did that experience turn out so good? I think it was a combination of two really important things: the organization and the people. The organization created a foundation. It created a continuity. It created a plan. It created opportunity for people to serve. But what ultimately made the difference are the people who chose to serve. The Disney Corporation has something known as the ride-out crew. The ride-out crew are employees who have volunteered to ride out storms when they happen. So what they do is they sign up and they go through extra training, and when a hurricane is declared, when the level reaches a certain point, they get a call. They show up at work with their suitcases, agreeing to not leave until the storm is over. The people we were working with were there for almost 72 hours straight. Now, their employees are still getting paid and all that sort of thing, but they're kind of special. And I will tell you, it was special and it was different. Because these were a group of people who had taken the time to prepare themselves to be there to help out with other people. They had actually studied, they learned, and they made a commitment to stand in the storm with you and ride out that storm until it's over. And for us, what could have been a devastating experience, it's only a vacation, I won't overdo it. What would have been a very disappointing experience became an incredible experience. It was like, if you've ever been on a cruise ship, it's like being on a cruise ship in the storm. It was amazing. And I want to be really careful because there are people like just a few miles from that door who lost their homes. And we want to be, praying for those folks, and we want to, do what we can to kind of deal with that recovery. But what I will say is that because of what the people that I was with did, I had a really different experience. Because even as the storm raged, we had joy. We were experiencing goodness because of people. I started to think about that whole experience. That, we were in a place where, Bonnie and I find joy when things are going well. But it was also a place that we felt safe and supported when life got challenging. And when the storm hit, I didn't even realize how much comfort I found in that same place, where I'd found so much joy when things were good. Now, I'm talking about an amusement park. Imagine if that's how people saw their local church. Imagine if a community looked around and saw its local church And the way they described it is, you know what? I find so much joy when things are good, and I'm in my local church. But you know what? When the challenges of life rise up, there is no place I feel more safe and supported than my local church. And you know, this storm hit my life one day, and I wasn't ready for it. But in the midst of that storm, I found out that my local church gave me greater comfort than I even knew I could find. Imagine if that's how people described their local church. I mean, what would happen if communities saw their local church that way? Well, it turns out that Jesus tells us what will happen. As we'll see in just a moment, what Jesus tells us is that if people start to see their local church that way, the church and its people will start to serve as signposts. Signs pointing towards a fuller life. Signs pointing to how to have a deeper relationship with God. That the people and that church would serve as signposts to say that life doesn't have to leave you feeling alone. Life doesn't have to leave you feeling scared. I mean, we live in a time of the highest level of teen suicide ever recorded in history. We need to point people towards how that changes. Because there is depression and grief at every age group, whether we're talking about seniors, midlife, whatever I am, down to teens and kids. I mean, kids are committing suicide at 10 years old because they don't have anything to hold on to. And Jesus tells us that as the local church, we are called to help people find fuller lives, deeper lives. Because Jesus, as part of his Sermon on the Mount, and I've referred to the Sermon on the Mount a whole bunch the past few months, because there is so much powerful stuff inside there. And Jesus describes how Jesus followers, particularly when they come together as the local church, what we are called to be. What Jesus says is, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Now, chances are you have heard at least part of that verse before, that you are the light of the world. But it's actually hard for us, living in the 21st century in the Western world, to really fully embrace the imagery that Jesus is painting with that statement. That you are the light of the world, a town on a hill cannot be hidden. Because we have to think about what the landscape looked like. As Jesus stood on this kind of desert hilltop, talking to people, he's standing in a barren landscape in the Middle East, all brown, right? Depending on time of year, hot sun. Well, when you build a city in that portion of the Middle East, do you know what much of the buildings are built from? There is a very large supply of limestone just outside the city of Jerusalem. It's a very strong stone, but it's also, relatively speaking, easy to work with. And it's bright white, like soap white. And so when they would build these cities, they would cut these blocks of big white stone. Now imagine on this barren brown landscape on a hilltop, buildings of bright white stone. As the sun comes overhead and you're out in the desert, that city's going to glow. It's going to glow. And people would be drawn to it because they knew they'd find what they need over there. That's what Jesus is saying that we're supposed to be. That as the local church, as Jesus followers, we are to glow like that. We are to be a beacon like that. So how do we do that? How does a local church shine like that? I mean, how do we shine in the way that Jesus describes? Well, I think just like the city, it comes down to what the church is built out of. In the city, it was that white limestone that would capture the light and would gleam to be seen far away. Well, for the local church, it comes down to us. in what we do, and collectively what we do to serve our communities. The way we invest in people. I mean, the reality is that a community should be better because there is a church nearby. Whether people go to that church or not, everyone's life should be a little bit better because there's a local church nearby. And so Jesus tells us that that's what we are called to do. That's how we gleam, by serving people. That's how we become that bright beacon. So I was kind of thinking about all this, is that, we were kind of locked up in the hotel for 2 days, couldn't go outside, so a lot of time to think about stuff. And so I think about you people as I'm with my wife on vacation. But that's a different story. That's my problem, not yours, right? But I was thinking about all this. And I was like, we're a pretty small church, but we do some pretty neat stuff. I just was thinking about it. I'm going to take a minute and brag on you guys for a minute. Is that, I was thinking about all the things we do. And this church has been around a long time. This is our 250th year. And the church has a long history of serving the community. But I was really thinking about the stuff we've got going on this year. Because, we've kind of revived some things from the past. We've kind of changed the way we do some things. We've added some things this year. And I was just kind of going through some of the things we do. We do a few international things. We don't do a lot of international stuff, but we do a few key ones. There's a young lady named Bam in Thailand that through Compassion International that our church has agreed to support her throughout her until she turns 18 years old. We do things like Operation Christmas Child, which are the shoe boxes that get sent around the world to kids. Earlier this year, when the Ukraine war first broke out, or technically the Russian war on Ukraine first broke out, we sent tons of supplies to Ukraine. Blankets, clothes, shoes, all kinds of stuff. Locally, just as a place where people get together, we have a bunch of stuff. We have 4-H's here. We have an AA meeting every week here. We're working on possibly getting a second meeting here every week soon. We blood drives every month. WIC services for families are here every month, all things we get to be a part of. But for me, I am most passionate about the incredible energy that so many people in our church put directly into this community. When you think about the drive we did earlier this year, right? 2,000 cans of food collected and donated to our local pantry. Tons of food. And that was not an easy thing to do, because if you remember that drive, that we cooperated with the town to say if people would donate cans of food, for every can donated, the church would buy a matching can of food. Well, people donated 1,000. We had to go buy 1,000. I say we like I had anything to do with it, but our missions team had to go out and buy 1,000. Do you know what that was like in the spring? How long that took, how much legwork that took to go find 1,000 cans of food? But they did it. And people have food who wouldn't have had it. And one of the things that we don't talk that much about, that I think I'm going to start talking about a lot more, is that our missions team does a lot of incredible direct support in this town. If people are having trouble paying their fuel bills, we help people pay their fuel bills so they can keep the utilities turned on. If people are having trouble making their rent, we help them close the gap so that they can actually stay in their homes. One of the ones I think is the coolest one is when we help people with car repairs. So often people are okay taking care of themselves until their car breaks down and they can't get to work. And sometimes a few $100s can help someone keep their job because they can get their car fixed again. Right? We give literally thousands of dollars directly every year to help these folks. And that's just what we do directly as our church into our town. We also are part of a larger collective called CREM, Kearsarge Regional Ecumenical Ministries, which is a group of churches that serve the whole region around who are doing something very similar. And these are all things that we have going on. Not to mention this, right? The Thanksgiving baskets. That's one of my favorite things that we have. I'm actually so excited this year because in the time I've been here, it's always been COVID, so we haven't been able to kind of build the boxes or baskets this way. So this is the first time since I've been here we get to do that. And the thing is that I could kind of run through that list of all the things we do, whether it's BAM in Thailand, whether it's just hosting an AA meeting, helping someone fix their car, pay a fuel bill, give a Thanksgiving basket. But you know what those things are? Those things are changed lives. Somebody gets to make it another day because of those things. Somebody gets to make it another day because of what our church is able to do because of you. Because every time you give financially, you donate supplies, you volunteer for something, you join a team, every time you do something like that, you are part of what enables us to be part of changing lives. And that causes our church to begin to shine more and more like that town on a hill. And I truly believe we're just getting started. Again, I've been here 2 years and 2 months, something like that. And for the first year and a half, we were barely even open. But in this past year, we've been able to really start to get some momentum and start doing more and more things. And I truly believe this is just the beginning. And as we work together to do the things that we can do, we can become that place like I was describing in the beginning, where more and more of our community see this as a place where they find joy, because it's the people who create the joy and being with other people, experiencing that joy. But when things get hard, you are not alone. You're part of our family, and we're in it together. And we want to be here to serve. And as powerful as that is, as we come together collectively as a church, Jesus takes that metaphor of being the light and goes beyond the collective. He actually points out that as much as we shine as a collective, at times the way we are able to most shine is as individuals. Because as Jesus continues his statement, he says, "Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house." Now again, look at that imagery that Jesus is using. A bunch of people sitting in a room that is filled with darkness. And if just one person lights a light, everything changes. Things change for every single person in the room because one person chose to light a light. As Jesus followers, that's what we are called to do, to be that light in the room, whatever that means. And that means we're called to help the people around us, right? Of course, our family and our friends are people we want to be helping, but we want to go further than that, right? We want to go further than that. We want to actually try to help people, maybe if we don't know them. We should all be willing to lend a hand, provide support, to do the thing that we can do. If you can make a difference, be willing to make it. Because the reality is that it's as important as what we do collectively as a church is. There are so many situations that you as an individual can do things that we as a church could never achieve. The point is the things work together, right? The church kind of gives us that, kind of like I talked about the organization, it gives us that central piece, that hub, that thing we hold on to, that gives us a plan, creates opportunity. But the greatest differences come in one-on-one interactions. The times that we're willing to show up and help people, expecting nothing in return. That's when we shine the brightest. And I actually got to hear what I found to be a very interesting account of an opportunity to do that. You know, a funny thing happens if you do what I do. You always wonder, does anybody ever hear anything you ever say? The last Sunday I was here, I finished up that Samson sermon. And on that day, we talked about the importance of habits and the little things we do and how we can make a difference in the world in a small way. Or the small things, I guess what I would say is the small things we do can make a big difference, is what I really mean to say. And so someone shared a story with me after church that day. That after church, they went down to Market Basket. And as they were going through Market Basket, they noticed a gentleman who looked distressed. Now, what often happens when we see someone who looks distressed? Hope they don't bother us. Right? But what happens is when we see someone distressed, we can either kind of say, well, they're just going through a thing, I want to leave them alone. Or you might say they're okay. But this person said, how can I help? Is there some way I can help? And it turns out the issue was a big thing for the person it was happening to. They locked their keys in the car. And they lived too far away to go back home and get their spare set of keys. So this person is relatively helpless in this moment. So what did the person from our church do? I'll give you a ride. And so gave the person a ride home to pick up their extra set of keys and then drove them back. Take 20 minutes, maybe. Think about the impact on that gentleman's life. That he was trapped. And it's funny, we could look at how you locked your keys in your car. If you've ever locked your keys in your car far away from home, it's a scary thing. And instead, there was a solution. Someone from our church provided a solution. And it made a difference. And the person expressed their gratitude, but also the person from our church did something else that's really important. And something I think we want to really remember. Because there are kind of levels of what we can do. You know, it's easy to ignore people in their pain or kind of, I'll pray for you, but keep walking. That's kind of an easy one to do. Right? But when you get involved, that's another step. But there's also another step that as Jesus followers that we can take. And what happened in this case is during the drive between Market Basket and this person's home and back, the person took time to talk about our church and the things that we're doing. Now be clear, wasn't I hate that word anyway. See, I can't even say it right now. I hate that word so bad. They weren't trying to convert them, is what I'm trying to say. They weren't trying to convert them. They weren't trying to talk them into something. They weren't pressuring them. They're simply saying that, hey, I go to church here in town. It's a pretty cool place. You should check it out. There's some great people there. And I think that's the piece we often forget. That when we're helping people, and we should be willing to help people, we also want to point back to Jesus in some way. Again, not heavy-handed, not pushing it on people. If you're not comfortable talking about Jesus, talk about God. Not comfortable talking about God, talk about your church. Right? But just talk about it. Because that idea of stepping in and doing good and helping people and pointing back towards Jesus is the essence of what Jesus is saying in this whole discussion about being the light. Because he closes with, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Jesus' point is that as Jesus followers, we should be consistently trying to help people. And part of what we should do is be trying to help people to have an easier time in this life, to get people over the humps of life. When they get stuck, help them get through. But also, we should go a step further and help them to find life. The life that we know because of relationship with Jesus, our relationship with God, being part of the family of God. Because that's how we help people to have a better life, a fuller life, a more complete life, where we're not just getting people over the hump, but we're helping people to find a way to fill that hole that they have inside of them, to overcome that loss that sometimes we just carry with us, that feeling of loneliness, that we're the only one who's dealing with something. It's that we come together as the family of God to support one another, to support the people around us, and invite people in a not scary, not high-pressure way to be a part of what we're doing. Those two things work hand in hand, doing direct good and inviting people into something bigger. Because I think the way to shine, as Jesus describes, requires that whole thing to come together. It requires us coming together as the church, right? That central hub, that thing that gives us the opportunity and the plan. And in some ways also gives us a destination. Because sometimes it's really hard to talk to people about God or Jesus. Even for me sometimes it's hard, and I do it all the time. But you know what is easy? Come on out to church sometime. We do some pretty neat stuff. Or you know what? On Halloween, we could use some volunteers. Come on out, just help out. I'm not expecting anything from you. right? All those sort of things, right? There's chances. The church becomes a destination and the hub. But what drives it home, what really makes the difference, are the individuals. The willingness to care and serve other people, to step into people's lives. People we have relationships with, and sometimes people we just met. And as we do that, all the while pointing back towards Jesus in whatever way you're comfortable doing it, through our actions and our words, we become the light. We can kind of, in effect, walk up and say to someone, although you may not say these words, you know what, it's a blessing to me to be able to help you. And I'm able to do this because God has blessed me to be here in this moment and be able to do something for you. And I just want to share that with you. And my hope is that it makes a difference for you as it's made a difference for me.